Bohatu landed on the ground hard. He panted as he slowly stood up. As he turned around, he caught a fist coming at him from the corner of his eye. He moved his head out of the way quick enough to avoid the impact, but the sudden attack had him take a few steps back.
Anua, snap out of it!
The infected Toa gave a cold glare and charged at him. His hand caught Anua's fist. He then grabbed him by the arm and flung the Toa of Earth over himself and into a wall. Anua got back on his feet and summoned a pillar of earth that launched Bohatu straight into the ceiling. He was stuck there for a few seconds before the earth loosened around him and he slipped out and fell. Bohatu quickly summoned his mask of levitation and stopped himself feet from the ground.
Anua, I know you're in there. Don't you remember that you helped Lewa twice with this problem? You told him he was stronger than the evil controlling him. Now it's your turn. Fight it, Anua. You're stronger than this.
For a brief moment, it looked like as though his words went right through his ears. Then Anua stopped. His hands shook for several seconds before he clutched his fist tight.
You're right,
he whispered. He then groaned as he reached for his mask.
Get out! Get out!
Bohatu took the opportunity and ran at him. He grabbed the mask and gave a good yank, ripping it off of Anua's face. Both fell to the ground exhausted. Anua sat up and looked at his infected mask.
Whoa. Now I know what Lewa went through.
Bohatu smiled and then looked around.
Speaking of which, where is he? And where's Sarah and the Makuta? The Makuta took them,
replied Taraka Wanua.
Unfortunately, I can't say where to since he teleported them out of here.
Bohatu then faced Anua.
Then we need to find our brothers. They need to know the truth. But first we're cleaning that mask. You will need it.
Sarah stopped and listened as Lewa's scream echoed through the forest. Overwhelming guilt began flooding her mind, urging her to go help him. Going head-to-head against Runaja just wasn't possible. She would have to find a way to sneak around and wait for him to leave. She then heard the faint sound of mechanical joints coming from behind. She immediately ran, but in a different direction. After several minutes, she was able to circle around back to Lewa. She stopped right behind a bush and peeked through. Runaja was gone, but Lewa was against a rock, lying motionless. A few feet away from his body was her gun and knife. She slowly walked out of her hiding place and knelt next to the Toa. His breathing was faint, and she could see stab wounds all over the organic parts of his body. Metallic red blood covered both his wounds and her knife.
Lewa?
The Toa of Air opened his eyes slightly and slowly turned his head.
Sarah, what are you doing here? You have to quick flee.
I know, but I can't leave you here to die.
That's noble of you. But if you want to help, you should find my brothers. We must be near Kininui. There's a village northeast of here, along the shore. That should be where they are. Quick speed before it's too late.
He then closed his eyes. Lewa? She patted his face. Lewa, wake up! Lewa? She tried shaking him, but he didn't respond. Just then a sinister chuckle came from behind. Sarah froze. She could hear her heart thumping heavily.
Did you think running away would be that easy?
Said Runaja. She slowly turned her head and faced him. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Lewa's air katana. If I can reach that, I should be able to use it just like I used the ice sword. As she was about to run for it, the sword began to move. It startled her. In an instant, it flew into the air towards the Makuta. He stretched out his hands and caught the sword. That was spooky.
You could call it that.
He smiled. A look of shock came on her face. You can read my mind?
Of course I can, as well as a few other things. Now if you don't mind, hold still.
Sarah immediately sprinted into the woods.
Ooh, Oh, another chase. Very well. I'll play along.
Sarah ran as fast as she could, her lungs out of breath and her heart felt like it was going to explode. She wanted to rest very badly, but the faint sound of the Makuta's joints reminded her what would happen if she did. After what seemed like an eternity of running, she cleared out of the forest and found herself in a small mountain range. A canyon carved its way through the middle. On her side was a massive statue of a mask. On the other were stairs that led up to a shrine on top of one of the peaks. Surrounding it were 6 tall pillars. Connecting the two areas was a bridge. She could no longer hear Makuta coming from behind, but she wasn't going to take a chance. So she crossed the bridge. Halfway across, she stopped. Not to see if he was still following, but to catch her breath. Looking at the sunset, she was able to tell which way was northeast. So far, she was going in the right direction. A hiss made her look at the other end of the bridge. Several rocks she came out around the mountain and set foot on the bridge. She turned around and ran, but came to a sudden stop as she saw Runaja getting onto the bridge, accompanied by 2 other Rakshi.
Surprised?
She turned her head and saw the Rakshi on the other side already halfway across. She felt helpless as the gap between her grew smaller and smaller to the point that she felt like a trapped animal. As she was cornered to one side of the bridge, she felt her heel touch the edge. She looked down at the river below. A hand grabbed her arm as she yelped in surprise. She turned around and saw Runaja's eyes locked dead onto hers.
You could jump. Either way you die. But my way is more fun. For me at least.
He chuckled and tossed her to the Rakshi. They held her down as he drew out Lewa's sword and he raised them in the air. Sarah's eyes watered. She hung her head low and closed her eyes. For several seconds nothing happened. She slowly opened her eyes and looked up. Runaja was listening to a karata that had slithered its way to his shoulder. He didn't seem too pleased with what he was hearing.
Fine.
He then looked at Sarah.
Consider yourself lucky. My brother thinks you're too special to kill off.
He walked towards the shrine and signaled for the Rakshi to follow. They took Sarah up the flight of stairs. At the top, she could see a hole going deep into the ground. One by one, the Rakshi jumped in. When it was Sarah's turn, she got a quick glimpse of Runaja's disappointed expression before being pushed in. She let out a quick scream as she fell. The Makuta then held the karata in his hand.
Now, I have a message from my brother. Well, this explains quite a bit.
Anu said as he looked at a stone tablet. On it was a map of all the tunnels in the island.
Nupara said he had to build a tunnel. Turns out it leads to a tunnel that goes straight to the Makuta's former lair.
That would explain why the Rakshi weren't noticed until they attacked. But we shouldn't rescue them by ourselves. We need the others.
Anua paused.
I don't think they will help us rescue a human.
True, but they will help us rescue Lewa. Hurry up and get your mask on.
The toe of stone grabbed Kopaka's sword and Sarah's backpack. He then shared his mask power and the two made a dash for Kokoro.
Slow down!
Panted Tahu. He and the other Toa ran after Takanuva, after hearing what they identified as a gunshot in the distance. Takanuva didn't listen and kept running through the thick underbrush. Just then, he tripped over a root and landed on his face. Gali was the first to trip over him. Kopaka stopped in time, thanks to his Hakaku, but Tahu behind him didn't and plowed into him, setting them both over the other Toa.
Takanuva,
Scowled Kopaka.
Well, sorry.
Lewa! Screamed Gali. They looked and saw their brother out cold, with the gun and knife a few feet from his body. In seconds they scrambled out of their pile and ran to Lewa's side. Gali looked at his heart light. It was lit, but faint. She then placed her hands close together.
Don't! You won't have the strength to get out of here. We can carry him, too.
No, he needs this now. A blue sphere of energy formed. She pushed it towards Lewa and watched it engulf him. When it dissipated, Lewa's wounds were gone. Golly's legs gave out and she collapsed, but not before Kopaka and Takanuva caught her by the arms. Kopaka then searched the area.
I recommend we get out of here. The humans can't be too far away. Agreed,
replied Tahu as he took the gun.
Takanuva, take care of Gali. We'll get Lewa back to Gakoro.
Takanuva nodded and put his sister's arm over his neck. As his brothers carried Lewa, Kopaka spoke just softly enough for the Toa of Light to hear.
Don't rush. You'll only make things worse.
Takanuva stopped, unsure how to take it. Brother, whispered Gali. The Toa faced her. There's a river nearby. Take me there, and I'll regain my strength. Surrounding the temporary human camp was a thick blanket of fog. Mark made it so it could be used as a defense against the Toa, as well as to pull off his next scheme. He sat in his tent, preparing to carry it out. Just then a Karada slithered in. He broke his concentration and looked at the creature. As it spoke to him, he rested his chin on his fist with intrigue.
So the truth is beginning to unravel. Looks like I'll have to hurry. But first, a little visit.
Gali had her eyes closed and hands in the river, drawing its energy. Takanuva paced around, occasionally looking around for any sign of trouble. Finally, he couldn't hold it anymore and sighed in frustration.
Can I ask you something?
Gali opened her eyes and looked over her shoulder.
Do you think I'm a good Toa?
What do you mean? He came up next to her and sat on his knees.
I don't seem to be very good at helping or doing my duty. Despite defeating Makuta, Tahu, and Kopaka seem to think I'm not responsible enough to participate in missions and that I just get in the way.
Gali frowned. While Tahu and Kopaka can be a little harsh, they care for you. You haven't been a Toa for very long. If something happened to you this early, I don't think they would forgive themselves. As for the missions, there's more to being a Toa than defending your people and being a hero. A Toa is someone the Matoran looks up to for guidance and leadership, should it ever be needed. They become examples to Matoran with their patience, love, and wisdom. And while you are making some progress in your abilities, I suggest you spend more time on those qualities. You'll end up using them more often than your light staff. She pulled her hands out of the water and stood up. Come, we need to get back to Gakoro. BJ sat on the edge of a lily pad, watching the sun getting ready to set. Everything was quiet until he heard a guard announce the approach of two Toa. He immediately got up and ran into Nokama's hut. He peeked out the window and saw the same brown Toa from earlier, the second one he recognized as the one he saw in a tunnel. He then noticed that the brown one had the ice sword and Sarah's backpack.
What did they do to her?
He thought. He listened in as close as he could to their conversation. Turaga, are our brothers back yet?
I'm afraid not, Pohatu,
said Nokama. Just then a guard announced the arrival of several more Toa. While the Matoran cheered at the news, BJ thought his heart stopped. He drew out his knife. If he was going down, he wouldn't go down without a fight.
Brothers, we need your help. Lewa and...
Anua stopped and was taken aback as Lewa's body was carried into the village by his fellow Toa. Matoran gasped at the sight. Matanui, what happened to him?
Guests,
said Tahu as he showed Sarah's gun. The Toa's stone's mouth gaped. That isn't possible. Were there humans around?
We didn't see any, but we heard it happen.
Anua put a finger on his chin.
Something's not right,
he said to himself. Kopaka and Tahu began to carry Lewa towards Gali's hut. Along the way, they passed Nokama's home. Kopaka thought he saw movement inside and used his akaku. He then stopped.
Is something wrong?
Kopaka immediately shushed him and pointed to the Turaga's hut. Tahu activated his akaku and saw what he was talking about.
How did he get in? Don't know, but Lewa comes first.
They brought him into Golly's home and laid him on her bed. They were about to walk out when something caught the corner of Tahu's eye.
Wait. His heart light. It's still faint.
Lewa's breathing hadn't improved either.
He should be fully healed.
Kopaka activated his Ikaku again.
Perhaps we missed
He then spotted it.
something.
He pointed to the general area the bullet had gone in.
There's metal lodged in him. Can you get it out? Not when she sealed the wound. Besides, it's stuck between a few organs. I might make his condition worse. Then how are we supposed to get him better? Perhaps our intruder can help.
The Toa left and quietly snuck their way to Nokama's home. Using their Ikakus, they saw through the wall and found where the intruder was hiding. Kopaka ran in first and with his sword froze BJ's legs. The attack took the pilot by surprise. He screamed as he flailed his arms, struggling to keep his balance until he finally fell backwards. The next thing he knew, the tip of a blade was at his throat.
You.
Kopaka growled under his breath.
Brutaka, what's going on here?
Do not harm him.
Protested Nokama.
This human has rescued Wenua. The least we could do is let him stay.
Rescue? Look at Lewa. He's nearly dead. This is also the one who tried to execute me. This monster is going to get what he deserves.
Tahu yelled as he drew his swords.
Wait, I know someone who might be able to help him. He's a medic.
Where is he?
I sent everyone south. I separated from them shortly after. I can't say how far they've traveled.
Kopaka put his sword away and picked him up by his shirt. His cold glare made him wish he never spoke out.
Tell me what he looks like.
Sarah squirmed and struggled to break free, but eventually the frigid cold took its toll. Was it necessary to use chains?
Considering how the last human got loose, yes.
Replied Runaja. After a few more pulls, she quit from exhaustion. She put her head down and sighed. She could hear the Rakshi patrolling around the chamber, along with something else. Something coming towards her, but she couldn't make out what it was until it slithered up her leg. After letting out a yelp, she squirmed in discomfort as it traveled up her leg, inside her pants, and slithered under her shirt. It came out of the collar of her shirt and coiled itself around her neck before looking at her. She stared at the eel-like creature for several seconds until it opened its mouth and screeched.
What's the matter, Sarah? I thought you humans loved karate.
When they're deep-fried, she spat. Runaja ignored her and continued giving orders to Rakshi. Soon, Sarah spoke again. What's going to happen to me? She softly muttered. At first, Runaja was surprised that she asked that, but then smiled.
First, I'm going to be off doing errands around the island. Then I'll be taking you, and whatever else I find, with me to our stronghold, Destrol. There, I will have fun experimenting on you.
Sarah was hesitant to ask. What kind of experiments? He shrugged.
Don't know yet, but I'll come up with something. Maybe I'll have you injected with Hortica venom.
Sarah gulped. He walked off and casually waved.
I'll be back soon. Don't run anywhere.
He then laughed. Right as he reached the doorway, he stopped with a blank stare.
And what are you doing here?
The same can be asked of you. Just how did the little Brackus expose you, anyway?
Runaja spoke under his breath as he passed him.
You don't want to know.
The Makuta smirked and walked into the chamber.
Hello, Sarah. Remember me?
Sarah paused for a long time. There was something familiar, but she couldn't point out what it was. No?
Of course you don't. Not in this state.
He placed a hand on his chest.
I am Makuta Mutron, but you and your friends know me as Mark.
That caught Sarah's attention. It was his voice that was so familiar. I'm assuming then that you did to us what Runaja was doing to the Toa. Everything you said about them was a lie.
Oh no, not everything. Just the part where they're out to kill you and that Lewa murdered your friends.
A serious look came on Sarah's face. You killed Jesse and Tashila.
And soon a few more, all to push them into killing the Toa.
He tilted his head.
You should have listened to Lewa. He was the only one who knew the truth. But because of your stubbornness, he's dead, if not dying.
A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. Mutren knelt down and with a finger turned her head to face him.
Don't cry,
He smiled.
Anyone that survives the human Toa War will be captured and join you in my experiments. But until then, rest. You'll need all your strength to bear through them.
Without warning, Sarah's eyes became heavy. She knew she wasn't tired, or shouldn't be, was more like it. She resisted the urge, but the unknown force was overpowering, and she soon drifted off to sleep. To be continued.